What's good? What's cracking? It's your girl Taquisha Jones, aka Killer Queen T, aka Blackout T, aka oh my god, you're early again today. AKA, ooh, you so happy. AKA, why am I AKAing so much? Everything does not need to be AKA.
And it's your boy,
Elijah.
In this video.
We are on chapter 2 of Black Boy. I know y'all like to quiz. What took so long for us to get back here? Because this is going to be 3 videos. I already know it. The glad days that Don gave me liberty for the free play of impulse and from anxiety and restraint. I leaped to license and thoughtless action. My mother arrived one afternoon with the news that we were going to live with her sister in the lane, Arkansas, and that en route we would visit Granny, who had moved from Natchez to Jackson, Mississippi. As the words fell from my mother's lips, a long and heavy anxiety lifted from me. Excited, I rushed about and gathered my ragged clothes. I was leaving the hated home. Hunger, fear, leaving days that had been dark and lonely as death. While I was packing, a playmate came to tell me that one of my shirts was hanging damp upon the clothesline. Filled more with the sense of coming freedom than with generosity, I told him that he could have it. What was the shirt to me now? The children stood about and watched me with envious eyes as I crammed my things into a suitcase. But I did not notice them. The moment I had learned that I was to leave, my feelings had recoiled so sharply and quickly from the home that the children simply did not exist for me anymore. Their faces posed the power of evoking in me a million memories that I longed to forget. And instead of leaving drawing me to them in communion, it had flung me forever beyond them. I guess it was like a thing back then. You just left your kid at the home for a little bit you paid the home to take care of your kid while you got your shit together, I guess. I did not even think of saying goodbye to the boys and girls with whom I had eaten and slept and lived with for so many weeks. My mother scolded me for my thoughtlessness and bade me say goodbye to them. Reluctantly, I obeyed her, wishing that I did not have to do so. As I shook the dingy palms extended to me, I kept my eyes averted, not wanting to look again into faces that hurt me because they had become so thoughtfully associated in my feelings with hunger and fear. And shaking hands, I was doing something that I was to do countless times in the years to come, acting in conformity with what others expected of me, even though by the very nature and form of my life, I did not and could not share their spirit. After I had outlived the shocks of childhood, after the habit of reflection had been born in me, I used to mull over the strange absence of real kindness in Negroes. How unstable was our tenderness, how lacking in genuine passion we were, how void of great hope, how timid our joy, how bare our traditions, how hollow our memories, how lacking we were in those intangible sentiments that bind man to man, and how shallow was even our despair. After I had learned our other ways of life, I used to brood upon unconscious irony of those who felt the Negroes led so passionate in assistance. I saw that what had been taken for our emotional strength was our negative confusions, our flights, our fears, our frenzy under pressure. That might be true now that I'm thinking about it. Maybe we think motherfuckers are strong, and actually, it's a frenzy under pressure. Whenever I thought of the essential bleakness of black life in America, I knew that Negroes had never been allowed to catch the full spirit of Western civilization. That they lived somehow in it, but not of it. And when I brought it up on the cultural barrenness of black life, I wanted of clean, positive tenderness, love, honor, loyalty, and the capability to remember were native with men. I asked myself if these human qualities when I fostered, won, struggled, and suffered for, preserved and ritual from one generation to another. Granny's home in Jackson was an enchanting place to explore. It was a 2-story frame sculpture of 7 rooms. My brother and I used to play hide and seek in the long, narrow hallways and on and under the stairs. Granny's son, Uncle Clark, had brought her this home, and its white plaster walls, its front and back porches, its round columns and banisters made me feel that surely there was no finer house in all the round world. There were wide green fields in which my brother and I roamed and played and shouted. And there were the timid children of the neighbors, boys and girls, to whom my brother and I felt superior in worldly knowledge. We took pride in telling them what it was like to ride on a train, what the yellow, sleepy Mississippi River looked like, how it felt to sail on the Kate Adams, what Memphis looked like, and how I had run off from the orphan home. And we would hint that we were pausing for but a few days, and then would be off to even a more fabulous place and marvelous experiences. To help support the household, my grandmother boarded a colored school teacher, Ella, a young woman with so much remote and dreamy and silent a behavior, a manner, that I was so much afraid of her as I was attracted to her. I had long wanted to ask her to tell me about the books that she was always reading, but I could never quite summon enough courage to do so. One afternoon, I found her sitting alone up on the front porch reading. "Ella," I begged, "please tell me what you are reading." "It's just a book," she said evasively, looking about with apprehension. "But what's it about?" I asked. "Your grandmother wouldn't like it if I talked to you about novels," she told me. I detected a note of sympathy in her voice. "I don't care," I said loudly and bravely. "Shh, you mustn't say things like that," she said. "But I want to know." "When you grow up, you'll read books and know what's in them," she explained. "But I want to know now." She thought a while, then closed the book. "Come here," she said. I sat at her feet and lifted my face to hers. "Once upon a time, there was an old man named Bluebeard," she began in a low voice. She whispered to me the story of Bluebeard and his 7 wives. And I ceased to see the porch, the sunshine, her face, everything, her face. As her words fell upon my new ears, I indulged them with a reality that welled up from somewhere within me. She told how Bluebeard had duped and married his 7 wives, how he had loved and slain them, how he had hanged them up by their hair in a dark closet. The tale made the world around me be live. As she spoke, reality changed, the look of things altered, and the world became peopled with magical presence. My sense of life deepened, and the feel of things was different somehow. Enchanted and enthralled, I stopped her constantly to ask for details. My imagination blared. The sensations the story aroused in me were never to leave me. When she was about to finish, when my interest was keenest, when I was lost to the world around me, Granny stepped briskly onto the porch. "You stop that, you evil girl!" she shouted. "I want none of that devil stuff in my house." Her voice jarred me so that I gasped. For a moment, I did not know what was happening. "I'm sorry, Miss Wilson," Ella stammered, rising. But he asked me." "He's just a foolish child and you know it," Granny blared. Anna bowed her head and went into the house. "But Granny, she didn't finish," I protested, knowing that I should have kept quiet. She bared her teeth and slapped me across my mouth with the back of her hand. "You shut your mouth," she hissed. "You don't know what you talking about." Damn, Granny. But I wanna hear what happened," I wailed, dodging another blow that I thought was coming. "That's the devil's work," she shouted. My grandmother was nearly white as a Negro can get without being white, which means that she was white. The sagging flesh of her face quivered. Her eyes, large, dark, deep-set, wide apart, glared at me. Her lips narrowed to a line, her high forehead wrinkled. When she was angry, her eyelids drooped halfway down over her pupils, giving her a boastful aspect. "But I like the story," I told her. "You gonna burn in hell," she said with such furious conviction that for a moment I believed her. Not to know the end of the tale filled me with a sense of emptiness, loss. I hungered for the sharp, frightening, breathtaking, almost painful excitement the story had given me, and I vowed that as soon as I was old enough, I would buy all the novels there were and read them to feel that thirst for violence that was in me. For intrigue, for plotting, for scenery, for bloody murders. So profoundly responsive a chord had the tale struck in me that the threats of my mother and grandmother had no effects whatsoever. They read my instincts as mere obscenity, as foolishness, as something that would quickly pass. And they had no notion how desperately serious the tale had made me. They could not have known that Ella's whispered story of deception and murder had been the first experience in my life that had elated from me a total emotional response. No words or punishments could have possibly made me doubt. I had tasted what to me was life, and I would have more of it somehow, some way. I realized that they could not understand what I was feeling, and I kept quiet. But when no one was looking, I would slip into Elsa's room and steal a book and take it back to the barn and try to read it. Usually I could not decipher enough words to make the story have meaning. I burned to learn to read novels, and I tortured my mother into telling me the meaning of every strange word I saw. Not because the word itself had value, but because it was a gateway to a forbidden and enchanting land. Yeah, that makes sense. One afternoon, my mother became so ill that she had to go to bed. When night fell, I need to look for ending. Okay, I got one. When night fell, Granny assumed the task of seeing that my brother and I bathed. She set 2 tubs of water in our room and ordered us to pull off our clothes, which we did. She sat on one end of the room knitting, lifting her eyes now and then from the wool to watch us and direct us. My brother and I splashed in the water, playing, laughing, trying our utmost to fling suds into each other's eyes. The floor was getting so sloppy that Granny scolded us. "Stop that foolishness and wash yourselves." "Yes, ma'am," we answered automatically and proceeded with our plan. I scooped up the double handful of suds and called to my brother. He looked and I swung the suds, but he ducked and the white foam splattered on the floor. "Richard, stop that playing and bathe." "Yes, ma'am," I said, watching my brother to catch him unaware so that I could fling more suds at him. "Come here, you Richard," Granny said, putting her knitting aside. I went to her walking sheepishly and naked across the floor. She snatched the towel from my hand and began to scrub my ears, my face, and my neck. "Bend over," she ordered. I stopped. She scrubbed my anus. My mind was in a sort of daze, midway between daydreaming and thinking. Then, before I knew it, words whose meanings I did not fully know, had slipped out of my mouth. "When you get through, kiss back there," I said, the words rolling softly but unpremeditatedly. My first indication that something was wrong was that Granny became terribly still. Then she pushed me violently from her. I turned around and saw that her white face was frozen, that her black, deep-set eyes were blazing at me unblinkingly. Taking my cue from her cruel expression, I knew that I had said something awful, but I had no notion at the moment just how awful it was. Granny rose slowly and lifted the wet towel. "Ooh, you finna beat him?" High above her head and brought it down across my naked back with the outraged fury of her 60-odd-year-old body, leaving an aching streak of fire burning and quivering on my skin. I gasped and hid my breath, fighting against the pain. Then I howled and cringed. I had not realized the meaning of what I had said. Its moral horror was unfelt by me, and her attack seemed without cause. Sometimes you gotta make sure they know what they're saying, definitely when they're young, and he seemed like he's still young. She lifted the wet towel. "Damn, you gonna beat him?" And struck me again with such force that I dropped to my knees. I knew that if I did not get out of her reach, she would kill me. Naked, I rose and ran out the room screaming. My mother hurried from her bed. "What's the matter, Mama?" she asked Granny. I lingered in the hallway, trembling, looking at Granny, trying to speak, but only moving my lips. Granny seemed to have gone out her mind, for she stood like stone, her eyes dead upon me, not saying a word. "Richard, what have you done?" my mother asked. Poised to run again, I shook my head. "What's the matter, for God's sake?" my mother asked me. Of Granny, of my brother, turning her face to one another. Granny wilted, half turned, flung the towel to the floor, then burst into tears. I was trying to wash him," Granny whispered. "Here," she continued pointing, "and that black little devil." Her body was shaking with insulting rage. "He told me to kiss him there when I was through." Now my mother stared without speaking. "No!" my mother exclaimed. "He did," Granny whimpered. "He didn't say that," my mother protested. "He did," Granny sighed. I listened vaguely knowing now that I had committed some awful wrong that I could not undo. That I had uttered words I could not recall even though I ached to nullify them, kill them. Turning back time to the moment before I had talked so that I could have another chance to save myself. My mother picked up the wet towel and came toward me. I ran into the kitchen, naked, yelling. She came hard up on my heels, and I scudded into the backyard, running blindly into the dark, butting my head against the fence, the tree, bruising my toes on sticks of wood, still screaming. I had no way of measuring the gravity of my wrong. I'm finna say, nobody stopped to, try to explain what he had done wrong? Ask him where he ran it at? They just went to beat it. And I assumed that I had done something for which I would never be forgiven. Had I known just how my words had struck them, I would have remained still and taken my punishment. For it was the feeling that anything could or would happen to me that made me wild with fear. Come here, you little filthy fool, my mother called. I dodged her and ran back into the house, then again into the hallway, my naked body flashing frantically through the air. I crossed in the dark corner. My mother rushed up on me, breathing hard. I ducked, crawled, stood, and ran again. You may as well stand still, my mother said. I'm going to beat you tonight if it's the last thing I do on this earth. Again, she charged me and I dodged, dismissing the stinging swish of the wet towel and scooted into the room where my brother stood. What's the matter, he asked, for he had not heard what I had said. A blow fell on my mouth. I roared. Granny was up on me. She struck me with another blow on my head with the back of her hand. Then my mother came into the room. I fell to the floor and crawled under the bed. You come out of there, my mother yelled. No, I cried. Come out or I'll beat you within an inch of your life, she said. No, I said. Call Papa, Granny said. I trembled. Granny was sending my brother to fetch Grandpa, of whom I was mortally afraid. He was a tall, skinny, silent, grim black man who had fought in the Civil War with the Union Army. When he was angry, he would grit his teeth with a terrified, grating sound. He kept his army gun in his room, standing in a corner, loaded. He was under the delusion that the war between the states would be resumed. I heard my brother rush out of the room, and I knew it was but a matter of minutes before Grandpa would come. I balled myself into a knot and moaned, No, no, no. Grandpa came and ordered me from under the bed. I refused to move. Come out of there, little man, he said. No. Do you want me to get my gun? No, sir. Please don't shoot me, I cried. Then come out. I remained still. Grandpa took hold of the bed and pulled it. I clung to the bedpost and was dragged over the floor. Grandpa ran at me and tried to grab my leg, but I crawled out of reach. I rested on all floors and kept in the center of the bed, and each time the bed moved, I moved, following. Get out of here and get your whipping, my mother yelled. I remained still. The bed moved and I moved. I did not think. I did not plan. I did not plot. Instinct told me what to do. There was painful danger, and I had to avoid it. Grandpa finally gave up and went back to his room. When you come out, you'll get your whipping, my mother said. No matter how long you stay under there, you're going to get it. And no food for you tonight. Why is we not explaining? Why is we just... What'd he do, my brother asked. Something he ought to be killed for, Granny said. But what, my brother asked. Shut up and get to bed, my mother said. See? They still being open, so you just gonna beat the boy for no reason? He don't even know what he did. He can't just be beat. I stayed under the bed far into the night. The household went to sleep. Finally, hunger and thirst drove me out. When I stood up, I found my mother lurking in the doorway, waiting for me. Come into the kitchen, she said. I followed her and she beat me, but she did not use the wet towel. Grandpa had forbade that. Between strokes of the switch, she would ask me where I had learned the dirty words, and I could not tell her. And my inability to tell her made her furious. I'm going to beat you until you tell me, she declared. And I could not tell her because I did not know. None of the obscene words I had learned at school in Memphis had dealt with perversions of any sort. Although I might have learned the words while loiteringly drunkenly in saloons. The next day, Granny said emphatically that she knew who had ruined me. That she knew I had learned about foul practices from reading Elsa's books. And when I asked what foul practices were, my mother beat me afresh. Damn, y'all don't even want to tell the boys what shit mean. No matter how hard I tried to convince them that I had not read the words in the book or that I could not remember having heard anyone say them, they would not believe me. Granny finally charged Ella with telling me things that I should not know, and Ella, weeping and distraught, packed her things and moved. The tremendous upheaval that my words had caused made me know that there lay back of them much more than I could figure out. And I resolved that in the future I would learn the meaning of why they had beat and denounced me. The days and hours began to speak now with a clearer tongue. Each experience had a sharp meaning of its own. There was the breathless listening anxiety fun of chasing and catching flirting fireflies on drowsy summer nights. There was the dreading hospitality and the pervading smell of sweet mangolis. There was the aroma of limitless freedom distilled from the rolling sweep of tall green grass swaying and glittering in the wind and sun. There was a feeling of impersonal plenty when I saw a bowl of cotton whose cup had spilt over and straggled in white fleece toward the earth. There was a pity chuckle that bubbled in my throat when I watched a fat duck waddle across the backyard. There was the suspense I felt when I heard the taunt sharp song of a yellow-black bee hovering nervously but patiently above a white rose. There was a drugged sleeping feeling that came from sipping glasses of milk, drinking them slowly so that they would last a long time, and drinking enough for the first time in my life. There was the bitter amusement of going into town with Granny and watching the baffled stares of white folks who saw an old white woman leading two undeniable nigger boys in and out of stores of Capitol Street. There was a slow flesh, salvia simulating smell of cooking cotton seeds. There was the excitement of fishing in muddy country creeks with my grandpa on cloudy days. There was a fear and awe that I felt when Grandpa took me to a sawmill to watch the giant rolling steel blades whine and scream as they bit into wet green logs. There was a plucky taste that almost made me cry when I ate my first half-ripe permission. There was a greedy joy and a tangy taste of wild hickory nuts. There was a dry, hot summer morning when I scratched my bare arms on beers while picking blackberries and came home with my fingers and lips stained black with sweet berry juice. There was the release of eating my first fried fish sandwich, nibbling at it slowly and hoping that I would never eat it up. There was the all-night ache in my stomach after I climbed the neighbor's tree and eating stolen unripe peaches. There was the morning when I thought I would fall dead from fear after I had stepped with my bare feet upon a bright little green garden snake. And there were the long, slow, drowsy days and nights of drizzling rain. Okay. Ew. No, come on now. Okay. At last, I'm going to read this little paragraph, I think. And then we're going to go to the next, going to start another video. At last, we were in a railroad station with our bags, waiting for the train that would take us to Arkansas. And for the first time, I noticed that there were two lines of people at the window ticket, a white line and a black line. During my visit at Granny, seeing a sense of two races that had been born to me with a sharp concreteness that would never die until I died. When I boarded the train, I was aware that we niggers were in one part of the train and that the whites were in another. Natively, I asked to go and see how the whites looked while sitting in their part of the train. Can I go and peek at the white folks? I asked my mother. You keep quiet, she said. But that wouldn't be wrong, would it? Would you keep still? But why can't I? Quit talking foolishness. I began to notice that my mother became irritated when I questioned her about whites and blacks. And I could not quite understand it. I wanted to understand these two sets of people who lived side by side and never touched, it seemed, except in violence. Now, there was my grandmother. Was she white? Just how white was she? What did the whites think of her whiteness? Mama, is Granny white? I asked as the train rolled through the darkness. If you got eyes, you can see what color she is, my mother said. That's not the question. This mama is blowing me low-key. Is she blowing y'all? I mean, do white folks think she's white? Why don't you ask the white folks that she counted? But you know I insisted. Why should I know, she asked? I'm not white. Granny looks white, I said, hoping to establish one fact at least. Then why is she living with us colored folks? Don't you want Granny to live with us? She asked bluntly my question. Yes. Then why are you asking? I want to know. Doesn't Granny live with us? Yes. Isn't that enough? But does she want to live with us? Why didn't you ask Granny that? My mother invaded again in a tiny voice. Did Granny become colored when she married Grandpa? Will you stop asking silly questions? But did she? Granny didn't become colored, my mother said angrily. She was born the color she is now. Again, I was being shut out of the secret, the thing, the reality I felt somewhere beneath all the words and silences. Why didn't Granny marry white men, I asked. Because she didn't want to, my mother said peevishly. Why don't you want to talk to me, I asked. She slapped me and I cried. Wow. Later, grudgingly, she told me that Granny came of Irish, Scot, and French stock, in which Negro blood had somewhere and somehow been infused. She explained all in a matter-of-fact, offhand, neutral way. Her emotions were not involved at all. What was Granny's name before she married Grandpa? Baldwin. Who gave her the name? The white man who owned her. She was a slave? Yes. And Bowden was the name of Granny's father. Granny doesn't know who her father was, so they just gave her any name. They gave her a name, that's all I know. Couldn't Granny find out who her father was? For what, silly? So she could know. Know for what? Just to know. But for what? I could not say. I could not get anywhere. Mama, where did father get his name? From his father. And where did the father of my father get his name? Like Granny got hers. From a white man. Do they know who he is? I don't know. Why don't they find out? For what? My mother demanded harshly. And I can think of no rational or practical reason why my father should try to find out who his father's father was. What has Papa got in him? I asked. Some white, some red, and some black, she said. Indian, white, and nigger? Yes. Then what am I? They'll call you a colored man when you grow up, she said. Then she turned to me and spat mockingly and asked, do you man, Mr. White? So that's where we're going to leave this out at right here. We're going to leave this out off of him, her asking him, do you man? Do you mind being colored? Because, I don't know. In this time, I don't. Right? It's life. It's life, y'all. All right. Let's go to the next video. Click that button right there. Here. Over there.